Let's jump in the Wayback Machine and take a look at an old apologist just to prove that they haven't gotten any better since. And that shouldn't surprise anyone, but we're going to go into a deep dive into the stupidity of presuppositionalists. Hopefully, it'll help the next time you run into one of these idiots, so stay tuned. People seem to like the last time that I took on Cornelius Van Til, so we're going to do that again. This time, we get a video of a talk about his presuppositions. And I'm sorry, but presupposing that you're right, that doesn't make you right. The only way you can demonstrate that you're actually right is through evidence. And sadly, none of these people have any. I don't think this is going to go well, but we'll see. We might actually be wrong.
And that, I would say that's always true. A method and a position are always involved in one another. Logic is not a neutral something. It isn't like a sharp knife, which a bread knife. You can either use it to cut bread with and give it to your covenant children, or you can cut your throat with it.
Sort of. The question here is, what is your ultimate goal? Do you want to get to reality, or do you want to get to emotional comfort? In the case of the religious, as we see so often, they really only care about comfort. They want to reach the conclusion that they're already committed to for non-intellectual reasons. So let's talk about logic for a moment here. By definition, logic is reasoning conducted or assessed according to strict principles of validity. It is a method of reasoning that involves a series of statements, especially in philosophy, where each of them must be true if the overall statement is true. It's how you get to valid and sound arguments. Your feelings don't have the slightest thing to do with it, and that's really where people like Van Til are going to go wrong, because it's all presuppositionalists do. They all go wrong. All theists everywhere go wrong for this reason. They've got a goal in mind, and truth means absolutely nothing. So let's continue.
In other words, that is what people often think of as being what a method is, that you can come to any conclusion with. I would say, on the contrary, a starting point and a method and a conclusion are always involved in one another.
Not in the way that he's intending, I don't think. Now, maybe I'm misreading him, I don't know. This is just a small part of a larger discussion, and I can only go by what's in this particular video, but at least for me, none of those things are actually involved in any search for truth at all. I mean, my conclusion, I suppose, is that I want to reach the best supported, best evidenced outcome that I can without anything else getting in the way. I don't care about feelings, mine or anybody else's. I know that a lot of religious people don't believe that, but I don't. I really don't. I am not like you in that regard. I'm not trying to force my way into something that makes me happy, because happiness is not truth. My happiness just doesn't matter in this regard. And that's something that a lot of people don't seem to understand, and it gets in the way of getting to rational conclusions.
Now, isn't that horrible? Yes, here's the non-Christian starting point, the non-Christian method, and the non-Christian conclusion.
Except, I don't think that it is. This is where I think he and a lot of theists go entirely wrong. I've mentioned this before, but there is no Christian worldview or atheist worldview, or at least there shouldn't be. Worldviews are a complete waste of time. Worldviews are an artificial ideology draped over reality so that you can only see the things that you want to see through a lens that you like without having to actually address objective reality as it actually is. It is viewing the world through a pair of rose-colored glasses that you've welded to your face because that's how you really wish the world was, without regard to whether or not that's what it's really like. Now, this isn't just a religious problem. Lots of groups out there do the exact same thing. There are plenty of political ideologies right now that are doing that. They pick an emotional belief and they can only see the world through that particular lens, whether that lens makes any sense or not. This is the problem with worldviews, and I think I've said it before, it's the difference between seeing the world, what if things were this way, instead of seeing the world, what is actually going on. When you just let your mind wander at random, you don't get to any actual truth. You just get to your own brand of comforting fiction.
You don't start with a method here, with a starting point there, the same between Christians and non-Christians, and then the method the same, and then, now, look here, my friend, I want you to come to this conclusion, to the Christian conclusion, not to that conclusion, as though you were on the starting point and on the methodology in agreement with him.
Except you're not supposed to start with a conclusion. There should be no Christian conclusion. There should only be the conclusion, the one best supported by all the evidence that we currently have at hand. That's the conclusion that you ought to want to reach. It doesn't matter how that conclusion makes you feel, only if it is best supported by what we have right now. Keep in mind that no conclusions should ever be eternal. I know that makes people really uncomfortable, but too bad. What we know changes all the time. Everything needs to be provisional because tomorrow, who knows what we might find out. Yet this terrifies a lot of people. They want simple, easy to understand results that they don't ever have to think about ever again. It's true forever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever, so there. Yet that's not how the world actually works. If it did, then everybody would believe that the earth was flat because once upon a time, most people did. Disease would be caused by bad air and demons because once people thought that was true. Now, we just know better, just like we know better than to think that magical sky wizards are up there dictating everything that we do. We ought to know that anyhow, and it's really too bad that people are still stupid enough to believe it.
It is fatal, absolutely fatal to your own efforts if you grant that the starting point is the same. The starting point is not the same. There isn't one fact on which the Christian and the non-Christian agree as to its nature.
Then one side is wrong, and sadly it's you people. Now that's a fair bit of generalizing, but Van Til is generalizing here too. It's why we have to have standards outside of our own heads. It can't be, but it makes me happy. That's not a standard, that's a childish temper tantrum. What you want to be true is irrelevant. What is actually true is all that matters. But you see which side actually cares about fact and which side does not. This is where the religious go entirely wrong, and none of them go so absolutely, completely, ludicrously wrong as the presupper. These people are out of their ever-loving minds.
Don't you see? For you, every fact is a created fact. For him, no fact. For every fact is a non-created fact.
Not so. For the Christian, it all has to fall in line with their emotional beliefs. For us, it just has to fall in line with reality. Reality is what matters. Reality is the only thing that matters. But I really want to go to heaven. Okay, so what? That only matters if heaven actually exists. If not, then it's as meaningless as saying, but I really want to go to Valhalla. Big deal. This is where people need to stop living in the comforting fantasy land in their heads and actually address what is really going on in the real world. But it's scary. So, too bad. Reality might be scary if you allow it to be scary, but it's still what's going on. Learn to deal with it.
There isn't any more basic difference than that. And your fact, you know every fact is what, according to the providence of God, it is and must be. For him, every fact is and must be what is not in accordance with the providence of God.
Says who? And for Christians out there, just mentally switch what he said to the providence of Allah, or the providence of Krishna, or the providence of the flying spaghetti monster. Because that's exactly what we hear when we hear Van Til speak. Whether you like it or not, all of those are essentially the same thing, until you can back up with some kind of corroboratory evidence that any of it is factually true. Faith isn't evidence before you give that one a try. Faith doesn't get you anywhere because anyone can have faith in anything. Some people have faith that there's a big hairy creature roaming around out there in the woods. Some people have faith that aliens from other planets have come to shove probes up their backsides. Some people think that there are gods. None of that is demonstrably true. At least not until you can objectively demonstrate it, and you people probably ought to get on that if you want us to take you seriously. Of course, for the religious, they usually don't care about any of that. Van Til never did. He was too busy clinging to his childish faith. And that's not something to be proud of.
Well, therefore, if you grant that he starts right, and that a method, such as Aristotle has, for instance, which fits in with that starting point, then it's a foregone conclusion that he will get you to his conclusion, unless he is inconsistent.
Which is why none of us ought to start with a conclusion at all. He keeps showing us where he's going wrong, and nobody on his side can see it as clearly as they should. Here's the thing. It's one thing if you've come to a conclusion rationally, evidentially, critically, and then you argue for said conclusion based on the evidence that you used to reach it in the first place. That's fine. You just need to be able to back it up with something more than, but I like it. This is where the religious go wrong. We ask them for their evidence all the time, and what they present, not only isn't it evidence, it isn't remotely credible. It's why their philosophical arguments fall apart the second that you look at them, because they are filled to the brim with logical fallacies. They don't even attempt to show that God did it is even remotely defensible. It's just stated as fact because that's what they wish was true. But that's not actually true, is it? At least not what objective evidence and a rational evaluation of the facts show. It's just, well, I don't understand what's really going on, and it doesn't make me happy regardless, therefore God. But that's just dumb.
Now, if he wants to be inconsistent, and if you can get him to be inconsistent, well, that's wonderful.
Of course, Van Til isn't going to admit that his side is inconsistent with reality all the time, because obviously he doesn't care. I mean, he's dead, but people on his side don't care. Maybe that's a little better. They don't like it much when we point it out, though, do they? Wonder why? Because here's another problem that they have. They are running on pure fifis and double standards. There is one standard that they use for everything else in life, and then there's the standard that they use when it comes to their imaginary friend. If somebody ran up to them and said, "No, run, run, Godzilla is attacking the city," they're not going to say, "Well, I'll just believe that on faith." Hopefully not anyway, you never know, there are some crazy people out there. They're going to ask questions and they're going to demand proof. Hopefully anyhow, before they go running off into the hills screaming, "The kaiju are coming! The kaiju are coming!" So why don't they do that with God? Because they just don't care.
Then you make Christians by stealth, so to speak, when they aren't looking. Well, or especially when they aren't thinking.
No, that's you. I'm willing to bet that you're not having a lot of luck these days. Maybe you never did, but today, most people are going to be asking a lot of difficult questions, and you have absolutely no credible answers. Well, you wouldn't if you were still alive, but we'll let that one pass. It's why groups like Stands Against Reason work the way that they do. They warn that their students are going to fail most of the time, just so they're not too disappointed when they get laughed at. Oh, but it's really God's job. God will take care of it. Followed by, keep giving us your money. Because it's just a scam. But then again, it always was, wasn't it?
Now that's what we ought not to do. We ought to make self-conscious Christians, particularly today. We want Christian people today who know and believe why they are Christians and can give account of their own faith, because that's what is needed in order to break down the position of others.
Now, you notice what this sounds like, right? It comes off like a con job. Mostly because that's exactly what it is. You have to break down objections. Well, why does that sound like a scummy used car salesman? Mostly because that's really what's going on. This is selling religion for the sake of selling religion, not coming to any demonstrable, objectively credible view on actual reality. Why? Because they just don't care. I mean, we keep coming right back to this time and time again, don't we? It just doesn't matter who you look at. They're all like this. William Lane Craig does this. Frank Turek does this. Andy Bannister does this. Cliff Knechtel does this. It's not just all the crazy pre-suppers. This is a basic tenet of Christian apologetics. Why? Money. It's always money. Well, we have to convince more people to be like us, so we make more money. After all, they're not out there doing this for free, right? You notice they're not out there talking to non-believers, are they? Because they just get laughed at and they wouldn't get paid. No, they're spending all of their time reinforcing the beliefs of the people who are already in their camp. You know, the people who are filling the collection plates, buying their books, and kissing their asses. Because that's really what they're after. Why can't the religious ever see that?
If you take the fully Christian position, then you can say, well, now you don't like this, do you?
I don't care. This is not about what I like or what I dislike. It's about what is actually true in the real world. You're going to notice that a lot of apologists talk in terms of, well, what do you like? What would you prefer? That doesn't matter. Truth is all that does. This is one of the most serious problems with the religious and why so many conversations fail when you actually get out there and try to have them. We are speaking two entirely different languages. They're after feelings. We're after facts. We want to know what is actually going on in the world. They just want the stuff that's comforting, and apparently they can't understand why anyone would ever want to be different. And that's kind of messed up if you ask me.
That you have a method that's included in the position and vice versa. All right, then I say, let's go on your position for argument's sake.
Except there really shouldn't be multiple positions, should there? We should all be after the truth. Now, that's an ought, not an is, granted, but from my perspective, if you're just looking for emotionally comforting lies because it helps you sleep better at night, then you got some problems upstairs, especially when it comes to intellectual and emotional maturity. This brings us right back to the unfortunate fact that the religious, they're really just a bunch of emotional children. They are much more comfortable with a lie, so long as it gives them those warm, fuzzy feelings inside, than they are with the truth, whereas I want the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, regardless of how it makes me feel. And that goes for everything. If I was going to die tomorrow, and there was nothing in the world that I could do about it, it was going to happen, just deal with it. Would I want to know? Damn straight I would. Wishful thinking doesn't make the world any better. Your comfort doesn't change reality. It just makes the individual who's trying to hide from reality dumber.
You start with a self, that's your starting point, not created. Therefore, floating around in an ocean, a shore of chance. You start with facts, that are not created. Therefore, you have pure contingency as a principle of individuation. You start with an abstract, impersonal principle of logic. That's your string. It has to be infinite. You have to do what in our position God does. God, for us, has strung all the beads.
You notice that he's just telling the non-religious what they think, right? Those non-religious who aren't actually in the room and can't speak up and tell him that he's wrong. Yeah, those people. This is another instance of you're either with us or you're against us. You either agree with absolutely everything he has to say on faith alone, or you're the enemy and he gets to define what you think, at least to his followers, because it's not like they're going to know any better, right? They don't care any more than he does. And you might say, well, you're doing the same thing, but no, I get this stuff straight from the mouth of the believers. Now, obviously, I can't talk to Van Til. He died in 1987. But people who have learned from him, who cite him as a major influence, I can certainly go and talk to them, and they can tell me exactly what they mean. It's just that what they mean doesn't make any sense to anyone outside of their faith. It doesn't make sense to anyone, really, but it just makes all the non-believers roll their eyes.
He has one comprehensive plan. We know in advance. He tells us what he is doing, and not in every detail, and we don't understand it exhaustively at all. But nevertheless, we have his word for it. If a little boy goes out in the woods with his dad, he may be only 6 years old, and he's got a pop gun or a BB gun, but he's not afraid because his dad is with him. Well, that's the way we are. We are not ourselves wiser or better than our others, and we don't have insights of our own. What we have received, says Paul, we have received by grace.
And there, he just admits that he's a child. He's looking for a father figure replacement. He wants someone to take care of him because he's too sad and pathetic to do it on his own. He's terrified to have to live in the real world. I mean, not that he is anymore, but he and his ilk, that's how they behave, and that's why they believe what they believe. This is about comfort, not fact. When the facts get in the way of their comfort, they simply get discarded because they want nothing at all to do with the real world. They need somebody to tell them what to do, and lacking that, they turn to the church, which has been screwing the religious over throughout history, and then to each other who are just making stuff up and insisting, well, God said so. But that doesn't really mean anything, does it? Here's the reality. The real world is there. Just open your damn eyes and look at it. You don't have to like it. Nobody cares. But you can't just shuffle off to Buffalo and make it all go away. That is not how any of this works. Therefore, the only rational position one can take is to accept reality as it seems to be, as all of the evidence that we have shows that it is, and just deal with it. It doesn't have to make you happy, because your happiness doesn't matter. All the kicking and screaming and crying and childish temper tantrums in the world, that isn't going to change anything. You still have to deal with the real world when you wake up in the morning, no matter how many lies you tell yourself in your dreams. Grow the hell up.
But having received it, it is the truth. And we can now, with this truth that has been given us, point out that any other position that anybody has, and then it makes no difference what that position is, whether it's idealistic, realistic, critical, realistic, existentialistic, this or that or what have you, right down to Sartre, from Thales to Sartre. You have these principles, and then you can show that he is a man of water that's going around building a ladder of water, setting it on the water, putting it against the water, climbing out of the water, can't get on the first ladder, rung of the ladder of water because he's made of water.
Notice what he just said. Effectively, once he receives these things, meaning all of the things from the Bible that he just happens to like, somehow that automatically makes it true. That is just not how any of this works. Just because you like it, that doesn't make it so. That's why these things have to be put to the test beyond your own head. Well, wouldn't that really be nice? Yeah, but that's meaningless because, nice or not, if it's not so, it's not so. Whether you like it or not, once you insert all of this religious bullshit into your brain, you've taken leave of your actual rational senses, and unfortunately, we all know through lots and lots of experience that these people just don't care. Van Til, he didn't care. He started with blind belief, based on empty faith, that his particular brand of Christianity was true, and then, because he couldn't imagine otherwise and he didn't want to regardless, it just had to be true because fifis. Now, what did that actually accomplish? Not a damn thing. Sad, right?
Now, that's not funny. I don't object you're laughing. I don't mean that. But I mean, that is actually the absurdity to which we must reduce his position. And then we're absolutely in accord with what Paul says, hath not God made foolish the wisdom of this world.
No, you're just as foolish as your imaginary friend is. Now, the end of this does sound very, very familiar to the last Van Til video that we looked at, so it might be part of it or just a similar talking point. I don't know. Most of these religious videos, after you've watched The Apologist for a while, it all starts to sound like they're saying the same damn thing. None of these actually say when or where Van Til said this stuff, so I guess we have to guess. That said, though, nothing that he's saying means anything beyond his religious echo chamber. This is why they don't want to talk to us. They're happy to talk about us. They're happy to spread their straw man version of us and tell their followers what we really think. But they won't just sit there on a stage with atheists who can respond as they wish to the religious bullcrap without an audience filled with Christians who are going to toe the party line. Because that's dangerous. We know it, and they know it. That's why so few of them actually do it. They know that everything that they rely on, their books and their beliefs and their empty claims, they won't fly up against someone who doesn't take any of those things seriously. So the safest thing they can do, the thing that makes them the most money, is to simply disengage, run back to the religious echo chamber, and pretend that they were right about everything all along. And it's really too bad for them that they're not.
Now, Paul knew what he was talking about. He knew his Greek philosophy.
And that's where it ends. Like I said, the end sounds very, very familiar, so if I've covered similar ground once again, I do apologize. I don't know about these things until the script is almost fully written, and by then, I don't usually want to have to throw it all away, so I don't. Hopefully, I've gone into a lot more depth this time, if I've done this before, because Van Til and the other precept apologists deserve to be torn down as completely and totally as they can be. These people are probably among the dumbest of the religious zealots, and that's kind of saying a lot. You can't get to a credible position by declaring that you're correct and then refusing to acknowledge even the slightest possibility that you're not. I'd like to say that modern presuppers learn from the best, but yeah, we know they didn't. Van Til was as dumb and delusional back then as they are today, and that's not something that they ought to be proud of. This is not how rational adults ought to operate. But we know that these are not rational adults. These are children. That they do act this way, that so many of them absolutely and demonstrably do, that doesn't say anything good about their religious beliefs or any other religious beliefs at all. This is why presuppers fail so often, especially when we're ready for them. When they can't blindside us, we can take them apart in a second. They have to fast talk faster than you can respond, and if we don't allow that, if we don't let them get a foothold, then they just wind up looking like the ludicrous jokes that they are. Hopefully, people are figuring that out more and more often. These people need to be shown to be the idiots that they are. And if you pay attention and figure out their dishonest tactics, it's not that hard to do.